Hey Cougars, welcome to the Scenic Route. Here I sit on my back porch wearing my Mickey Mouse flag hat and I've got my Captain America t-shirt on. So it must be Independence Day, right? So what are we going to do today? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about Independence Day. Now, you're thinking Scenic Route is for things that go off of the roadmap, things that aren't talked about in the textbook. Well, guess what? We're going to talk about a different Independence Day. There seems to be some conflict in history on what day we would celebrate our independence. And to explain, I'm going to have our old buddy John Adams. Here's John Adams, lawyer, farmer, going to be second president of the United States eventually, but for right now, he's just a guy helping in Congress. And he writes to his wife, Abigail Adams, and we will talk about Abigail in class because she is an incredible, incredible woman. But here's what John Adams writes to his wife. The second day of July 1776 will be the most memorable epoch in the history of America. I am apt to believe it will be celebrated by succeeding generations as the great anniversary festival. It ought to be solemnized with pomp and parades, with shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other, from this time forward forevermore. Now, a bunch of that. First of all, what you'll notice in this, and I typed it exactly as he wrote it in his letter to his wife, capitalization is kind of random, as is spelling. If you look, the word shows, S-H-E-W-S, should be shows. Spelling was basically, as long as you could get your point across, it worked. Do not try that in any of your English classes. It won't work. But back in 1776 it did. Illuminations are fireworks. So here's John Adams saying that the 2nd of July should be celebrated with picnics and fireworks and parties and all sorts of things. Wait a second. The 2nd of July. Don't we celebrate Independence Day on the 4th of July? Why the 2nd? Well, that's where this side trip comes from. The 2nd of July was important in American history because of this guy. This is Richard Henry Lee. Richard Henry Lee was a farmer and statesman from the great state of Virginia, and he was in the Continental Congress on July 2nd, 1776, when he proposed and had got passed a resolution known as the Lee Resolution. And here's what the Lee Resolution said. Resolved that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is, and ought to be, totally dissolved. So what exactly does that mean? I'll tell you what that means. On July 2nd, 1776, the Continental Congress passed a resolution saying that the United States was free and independent. We, on July 2nd, broke all ties with England. So as of July 2nd, 1776, we're free. So why do we celebrate Independence Day on the 4th? Well, knowing that they were going to eventually get around to declaring independence, the founding fathers had gotten a committee of 5 people, including Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Ben Franklin, to start writing a Declaration of Independence. But they weren't still happy with some of the words in it, so they went back and they continued to revise it. And it wasn't until July 4th, 1776, that the Declaration of Independence itself was finally finished, and they put it all together, got everybody to agree to it, they voted, and it was done. So John Adams was right. July 2nd really is Independence Day, thanks to Richard Henry Lee. By the way, Richard Henry Lee was the cousin of a guy named Robert Edward Lee, Robert E. Lee. We'll talk a lot about Robert E. Lee toward the end of our time together because Robert E. Lee was the top general for the losing side of the Civil War, the Confederacy. But more on him later. So Adams was right. The 2nd of July really is Independence Day. But since we don't get the famous document, the Declaration of Independence, until the end of the 4th of July, that's what we consider our actual Independence Day. So there you go. There's a little side trip in history. We will pick it back up later. Thank you very much and have a great time, Cougars. Bye.